Come closer, my dears. If you're here with me tonight, leave a like, subscribe, and share this tale with someone you care about. I'd also love to know, where are you watching from and what time is it there? I want you to listen to what I'm about to tell you, and I want you to believe every single word of it. My name is Margaret, and I am 82 years old. In my lifetime, I have lived through 82 Christmases. But no matter how hard I try to forget them, there are 3 I cannot erase from my memory. 3 Christmases when something knocked at the door, and the warmth of the holiday turned into something else entirely. You know, most people think of Christmas as a time of joy, of family gatherings, and beautiful lights sparkling on the snow. And for most people, that's true. But for some of us, Christmas brought uninvited visitors, unexpected moments, and horrors hidden beneath ribbons and wrapping paper. Tonight, I'm going to share 3 stories with you. 3 true stories that still follow me, even in my dreams. And after you've heard them, you may find yourself checking your locks twice before going to bed on Christmas Eve. Now, let me take you back to where it all began. In December of 1963, I was 21 years old. I had just married my husband, Frank, and we had moved into our very first real home together. It was a small 2-bedroom farmhouse on the outskirts of Portland, Maine. Not much to look at, but it was ours. The previous owners had left in a hurry because of a job transfer, and we had bought it for a price we couldn't refuse. Frank worked at the shipyard, putting in long hours in the freezing cold, and I worked part-time at the local library. Money was tight, but we were young and in love, and that felt like enough. Christmas was approaching quickly, and I wanted our first holiday in the new house to be perfect. I spent days decorating hanging garlands along the staircase, placing candles in every window, and setting up a modest tree in the living room. Frank brought home a box of ornaments from his mother, old glass decorations that had been in his family for generations. As I took them out one by one, carefully unwrapping each before placing it on the tree, I noticed something strange at the bottom of the box. It was a photograph, old and faded, its edges yellowed with age. It showed a family, a mother, a father, and 3 children standing in front of a Christmas tree, all dressed in clothing from the 1920s or 1930s. None of them were smiling. This is where I felt real fear for the first time. Would you have stayed in the house after this? In fact, their expressions were disturbingly blank, almost hollow. The photo had been taken in this very house. I recognized the mantel in the background, the same curved archway leading into the dining room. This family had lived here decades before us. There was something about that faded image that made the hair on my arms stand on end. When Frank came home from work that evening, I showed it to him. He barely glanced at the photograph before shrugging. Probably something the previous owners forgot, he said, heading toward the kitchen for dinner. Just throw it away. But I didn't. There was something about it that held me. I studied their faces, tried to imagine what their lives had been like. The children looked too serious, too still. The mother's eyes seemed empty, as if she wasn't looking at the camera at all, but straight through it. I placed the photograph on the mantel, between two candlesticks. It felt like the right thing to do, a small gesture of respect for the home's history. That night, I went to bed satisfied with how the decorations had turned out. Frank, exhausted from work, fell asleep almost immediately. I lay awake a while longer, listening to the wind howling outside and to the old house as it creaked and settled around us. Around 2 a.m., I woke up suddenly. No reason, no noise, just that sudden jolt of consciousness that sometimes happens in the middle of the night. The room was dark, except for the faint glow of moonlight coming through the curtains. Frank was still sound asleep beside me, snoring softly. I was about to roll over and go back to sleep when I heard it. Footsteps, light, quick footsteps, like a child running through the house. My heart started pounding. We didn't have children. We were the only ones in the house. I lay there frozen, listening as the footsteps moved from the hallway into the living room, then stopped. Silence. I waited, barely breathing, for several minutes. Nothing. Maybe I had imagined it. Old houses make strange noises, I told myself. Pipes expanding, wood settling. Nothing to worry about. But then I heard it again. This time, it sounded like multiple children. Running, laughing, playing. The sounds were coming from downstairs, clear as day. I shook Frank awake, whispering urgently, "Someone's in the house." He groaned, still half asleep, but when he heard the sounds himself, he bolted upright. He grabbed the baseball bat we kept beside the bed and crept toward the bedroom door. I followed close behind, my hands shaking. We made our way downstairs slowly, Frank leading with the bat raised. The sounds had stopped again. When we reached the living room and Frank turned on the light, everything looked exactly as I had left it. The tree stood in the corner, ornaments glinting in the lamplight. The mantel was undisturbed. Nothing was out of place. Frank checked the front door locked, back door locked, all the windows secure. There was no way anyone could have gotten in. "You must have been dreaming," Frank said, though I could tell he was trying to convince himself as much as me. We went back to bed, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. I lay there staring at the ceiling until morning light finally crept through the windows. The next day, I tried to put the incident out of my mind. I went to work at the library, helped patrons find books, organized returns, went through the motions. But I couldn't stop thinking about those footsteps, that laughter. When I got home that evening, Frank was already there, sitting at the kitchen table with a strange look on his face. "Did you move the photo?" he asked. I frowned. "What photo?" "The one on the mantel, the old family picture." I walked into the living room. The photo was no longer propped between the candlesticks where I had left it. It was now lying face down on the floor, several feet away from the mantel, as if someone had thrown it there. "I didn't touch it," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. Frank picked it up and turned it over. We both gasped. The photograph had changed. The family was still there, still standing in the same positions, but now they were all looking directly at the camera, directly at us. And the children, all three of them, were smiling. Wide, unnatural smiles that stretched their faces in ways that didn't look human. Frank dropped the photo like it had burned him. "This isn't possible," he muttered. "Photos don't change. This is the same picture, right? Maybe we just didn't look at it carefully before." But I had looked at it carefully. I had studied every detail. Those children had not been smiling, and they definitely hadn't been staring straight ahead like that. That night, neither of us could sleep. We lay in bed, both of us wide awake, listening. And sure enough, around 2 a.m., the sounds started again. Footsteps, laughter. But this time, there was something else. Singing, children's voices, singing "Deck the Halls" in a slow, discordant melody that made my skin crawl. Frank grabbed my hand, his palm slick with sweat. "What the hell is happening?" he whispered. The singing grew louder, coming closer. It sounded like it was right outside our bedroom door. Frank got up, bat in hand, and yanked the door open. The hallway was empty, but at the end of the hall, standing at the top of the staircase, were 3 small figures. Children. They were dressed in old-fashioned clothes, the same ones from the photograph. They stood perfectly still, holding hands, staring at us with those same unnatural smiles. "Who are you?" Frank shouted. "Get out of our house!" The children didn't respond. They just stood there, smiling, their eyes never blinking. Then, slowly, they began to walk toward us, not running, not rushing, just walking, their footsteps synchronized, their hands still linked together. Frank swung the bat in warning. "Stay back! I'm calling the police!" But they kept coming. As they got closer, I could see that something was terribly wrong with them. Their skin was too pale, almost translucent. Their movements were stiff, mechanical, and their eyes were completely black. No whites, no pupils, just endless darkness. They weren't children. They weren't even human. They were something else. Something wearing the shape of children. Frank slammed the bedroom door and pushed our dresser in front of it. We could hear them outside, scratching at the wood, their fingernails making horrible scraping sounds. The singing continued, growing louder and more frenzied. Fa la 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 la. Over and over and over, never stopping, never changing pitch. Then, suddenly, it all stopped. Complete silence. We waited, pressed against the far wall, Frank still gripping the bat, both of us barely breathing. Minutes passed, maybe 10, maybe 20. Finally, Frank carefully moved the dresser and opened the door. The hallway was empty. We searched the entire house. Nothing. No sign of anyone. No footprints, no disturbances. Just the photograph, still lying on the living room floor where Frank had dropped it. I picked it up, and my blood turned to ice. The family was back to their original positions, faces blank and expressionless. But now there were 5 people in the photo instead of 4. Standing behind the mother, partially hidden in shadow, were Frank and I. We were in the photograph. Somehow, we had been pulled into it, added to this cursed family portrait. We left that house the next morning, packed our essentials, left the furniture, left the Christmas decorations, left everything. We broke our lease, lost our deposit, didn't care. Frank found us a small apartment in town, and we never spoke about what happened that night. Not to each other, not to anyone. Who would believe us? We burned the photograph in a trash can behind the apartment building, watching it curl and blacken in the flames. But sometimes, late at night when I can't sleep, I wonder about the next people who moved into that house. I wonder if they found another photograph in a box somewhere. I wonder if they hung it on their mantle. And I wonder if, on Christmas Eve, they heard the sound of children running and laughing in rooms that should have been empty. 14 years had passed since that terrible Christmas in Portland, and Frank and I had built a good life together. By then, we had 2 daughters. Linda was 12, and Beth was 9. We had moved to a small town in Vermont, where Frank had found work as a foreman at a furniture factory. I stayed home with the girls, running the household and volunteering at their schools. Life was normal, comfortable, and safe. Or so I believed. That December was especially unforgiving. Snow began falling in the first week of the month and never truly stopped. By mid-December, nearly 4 feet of it lay on the ground, with drifts piled up to the windowsills in front of the house. The town was almost completely buried. Schools were closed for 3 days, and the children were delighted. Frank couldn't get to work. The 4 of us were trapped by the snow, with nothing to do but wait for the plows to clear the roads. The girls were going stir-crazy by the 3rd day. They'd watched every television show, played every board game, read every book twice. On December 20th, the snow finally stopped falling, and the sun came out for the first time in weeks. The whole world outside sparkled like diamonds. Linda begged me to let them go outside and play. I bundled them up in their warmest coats, hats, scarves, and mittens, and watched from the kitchen window as they ran out into the yard, squealing with delight. They spent hours out there, building a snowman. I could see them working together, rolling enormous balls of snow, stacking them on top of each other. Linda was always the creative one, arranging sticks for arms, finding rocks for eyes and buttons. Beth followed her big sister's lead, helping where she could. I made hot chocolate and kept it warming on the stove for when they came back inside. Around 4 o'clock, as the sun was starting to set and the temperature was dropping, I called them in for dinner. They came stomping through the door, their cheeks bright red from the cold, snow clinging to their clothes. "We made the best snowman ever, Mom," Linda announced proudly. "You have to come see it after dinner." "It's not a snowman," Beth corrected her. "It's a snow girl. We gave her a dress." I smiled and helped them out of their wet clothes, hanging everything by the fireplace to dry. We sat down to dinner, meatloaf and mashed potatoes, and the girls chattered excitedly about their creation. Frank asked them questions, praised their creativity. It was a perfect family moment, the kind you want to hold on to forever. After dinner, just as I was clearing the plates, Beth looked out the window and frowned. "Mom, someone's playing with our snow girl." I walked over to the window and looked out. In the fading twilight, I could see the snowman or snow girl, rather, standing exactly where the girls had built it. But something was different. It wasn't in the same position. I was certain they'd built it near the oak tree in the middle of our yard. Now it was much closer to the house, maybe 15 feet from our back door. "Are you sure you built it over by the tree?" I asked. Linda came to the window. "Yeah, we did. That's weird. Maybe Dad moved it." Frank shook his head. "I haven't been outside since this morning. Maybe the wind shifted it?" But that didn't make sense. Wind doesn't move snowmen. The girls pressed their faces against the glass, confused and a little annoyed that someone had tampered with their hard work. "Can we go fix it?" Beth asked. "It's too dark now," I said. "You can fix it tomorrow." They grumbled, but accepted this. We spent the rest of the evening playing cards, and by 8:30, both girls were yawning. I sent them upstairs to brush their teeth and get ready for bed. Frank went up to read them a bedtime story while I finished cleaning the kitchen. I was washing the last of the dishes when I happened to glance out the window again. My hands froze in the soapy water. The snow girl had moved again. It was now right next to the back door, maybe 5 feet away. So close that if I opened the door, I could reach out and touch it. My heart started pounding. This wasn't possible. Snowmen don't move on their own. Someone had to be playing a prank on us. But who? Our nearest neighbors were a quarter mile down the road, and nobody had been by all day because the roads were still barely passable. I dried my hands and called up to Frank. "Honey, can you come down here for a second?" He came down the stairs, still holding the storybook. "What's wrong?" I pointed out the window. "The snowman. It's moved again. It's right by the door now." Frank looked out the window, and I saw his expression change from curiosity to concern. He grabbed his coat from the hook by the door. "I'm going to check it out." "Be careful," I said, though I wasn't sure what I was warning him against. He stepped outside, and I watched through the window as he approached the snow girl. It was actually quite well made, about 4 feet tall, with a round head and a body shaped like a dress, just as the girls had described. They'd used sticks for arms, stones for eyes, and a mouth, and what looked like one of Beth's old scarves wrapped around its neck. Frank walked around it slowly, examining it. Then he bent down and looked at the ground. Even from inside, I could see his breath coming out in clouds of white vapor. When he came back in, his face was pale. "There are no footprints," he said quietly. "What do you mean?" "I mean, there are no footprints anywhere around it. Not the girls' prints from when they built it. Not any adult prints from someone who might have moved it. The snow around it is completely undisturbed, like it appeared there out of thin air." A chill ran down my spine that had nothing to do with the cold. "That's impossible," I said. "I know," Frank replied, "but that's what I saw. Or didn't see, I guess." We stood there staring at it through the window. In the glow of our back porch light, the snow girl's shadow stretched long and dark across the white ground. "Maybe it's some kind of optical illusion," I suggested weakly. "Maybe it was there all along, and we just thought it was somewhere else." Frank didn't look convinced, but he nodded anyway. "Yeah, probably." But neither of us believed it. We went to bed that night with every door and window locked, which we'd never done before in this house. The town was safe. The neighbors were friendly. We'd never had any reason to worry. But tonight felt different. I woke up at midnight to the sound of tapping. Soft, rhythmic tapping on glass. At first, I thought I was dreaming. But as I became more awake, I realized the sound was real. It was coming from downstairs. I nudged Frank, and he heard it too. We got up quietly and crept down the stairs. The tapping was coming from the kitchen, from the back door. When we reached the kitchen and looked toward the door, my blood turned to ice. There was a face pressed against the glass. A child's face, pale and round, with dark eyes and a wide smile. But it wasn't one of our daughters. The features were wrong. Too smooth, too perfect. It took me a moment to realize what I was looking at. It was the snow girl. If you saw that face at your door, would you even be able to move? Somehow, impossibly, the snow girl was standing at our back door, and she was looking in at us. Frank grabbed my arm. "Don't open the door," he whispered, as if I needed to be told. The face continued to stare at us, unblinking. Then slowly, one of its stick arms rose up and tapped on the glass again. Tap, tap, tap. The sound was hollow and eerie. Frank turned on the kitchen light, and that's when I could see it more clearly. The snow girl wasn't just standing there. She was perfect, too perfect. Her features were delicate and precisely carved, more detailed than anything two children could have created. Her smile was beautiful and terrifying at the same time. "Let me in," a voice said. It was high and sweet, like a little girl's voice, but it came from everywhere and nowhere at once. "I'm cold out here. Let me in." "Go away," Frank shouted. "We don't want you here." The smile on the snow girl's face never changed. "But I live here now. Your daughters made me. They gave me a face and arms and a dress. They brought me to life. Don't you understand? I'm part of your family now." "You're not real," I said, my voice shaking. "You're just snow, just frozen water." The laugh that followed made every hair on my body stand up. "Oh, I'm very real, more real than you might think. And I'm going to be here forever. Oh, every winter, when the snow falls, I'll come back. I'll be in your yard, watching your windows, waiting for someone to let me in. And eventually, someone will. Children are so trusting, aren't they?" Frank ran to the phone and dialed 911, but the line was dead. The phone lines must have frozen or been knocked down by the weight of the snow. We were on our own. "Go check on the girls," Frank told me. I ran upstairs as fast as I could. Linda and Beth were both sound asleep in their beds, thank God. I shook them awake gently. "Girls, I need you to come with me right now. Don't ask questions, just come." They were groggy and confused, but they followed me. I brought them into our bedroom and locked the door. "What's happening, Mom?" Linda asked, now fully awake and frightened. "There's someone outside," I said, trying to keep my voice calm. We're just going to stay in here until Dad makes sure everything is okay." Down in the kitchen, I could hear Frank yelling, and then I heard the sound of breaking glass. My heart nearly stopped. I pushed the girls behind me and stood in front of the bedroom door, ready to defend them from whatever was coming up those stairs. But the footsteps I heard were Frank's. He burst into the bedroom, his face white as the snow outside. "We're leaving," he said, "right now. Get dressed. Warm clothes. We're driving to town, even if I have to plow through the drifts myself." "Did it get in?" I asked. "No, but it tried." It threw itself against the door, hard enough to crack the wood. I grabbed a pot of boiling water from the stove and threw it through the window at it. It melted part of its face, and it ran back toward the woods. "But Margaret, it ran. Snow doesn't run. Whatever that thing is, it's not natural." We got dressed in record time, rushed to the car, and Frank gunned the engine. The tires spun in the snow, but he managed to get us moving. As we pulled out of the driveway, I looked back at the house. The snow girl was standing in our front yard now, watching us leave. Even from a distance, I could see that her face had reformed. perfect and smooth again, as if Frank had never touched her with the boiling water. We spent that night at a motel in town. The next day, Frank went back to the house with 2 of his friends from work. The snow girl was gone. There was no sign of her anywhere. No footprints, no disturbed snow, nothing. His friends thought he was crazy when he told them what had happened. But I knew better. I knew what we had seen. We moved out of that house 2 months later, as soon as the snow melted and we could put it on the market. We never told the new owners what had happened. I'm not proud of that, but what could we say that wouldn't make us sound insane? The girls never built another snowman after that winter. They never asked why, and we never explained. Some things are better left buried, just like some creatures are better left unmade. To this day, whenever I see children building a snowman, I feel a cold dread in the pit of my stomach, because I know that sometimes in the deep winter, when the snow is heavy and the nights are long and dark, some things that shouldn't be alive can wake up. And once they do, once you've given them a face and a form and a purpose, they don't ever really go away. They just wait. They wait for winter to come back, for the snow to fall again, for another chance to knock on your door and ask to be let in. And God help you if you say yes. The last Christmas story I need to tell you happened 18 years after the Snow Girl incident, when I was 53 years old. Frank had passed away 3 years earlier from cancer, and I was living alone in a small ranch house in New Hampshire. My daughters had grown up and moved away. Linda was in Seattle with her husband and 2 kids, and Beth was in Chicago finishing her medical residency. They called me every week and visited when they could. But for the most part, I was on my own. I'd gotten used to the solitude by then. I had my routines, my hobbies, my small circle of friends from church. I volunteered at the local animal shelter twice a week and took long walks through the neighborhood every evening before dinner. Life was quiet, predictable, and that was exactly how I wanted it after everything I'd been through. Have you ever thought being alone meant being safe? That December started out perfectly normal. I put up my little artificial tree on December 1st, hung some lights around the living room window, and set out the ceramic nativity scene that had belonged to Frank's grandmother. The house looked cozy and festive. On December the 15th, both girls called to let me know they wouldn't be able to make it home for Christmas. Linda's youngest had the flu, and Beth was scheduled to work a double shift at the hospital on Christmas Day. I told them I understood, told them not to worry about me, that I'd be just fine. And I meant it. I really did. I'd spent plenty of holidays alone since Frank died. I knew how to keep myself occupied. I had a stack of library books to read, a new jigsaw puzzle to work on, and several classic Christmas movies recorded on VHS tapes. I'd be fine. December 22nd was a Wednesday. I remember because that was the day everything changed. I'd spent the morning running errands in town, grocery shopping, picking up prescriptions, mailing some Christmas cards. I got home around 2 in the afternoon, put away the groceries, and made myself a cup of tea. It was already getting dark outside, the way it does in winter in New England, the sun setting before 4 o'clock. I was sitting in my armchair reading when I noticed movement outside my living room window. I looked up and saw a woman standing on the sidewalk in front of my house. She was just standing there, perfectly still, facing my window, staring directly at me. She was wearing a long arc coat and had her hands in her pockets. Her hair was covered by a knit hat. From this distance, I couldn't make out her features clearly, but something about the way she stood there made me uncomfortable. I watched her for about 30 seconds, waiting for her to move on, but she didn't. She just kept standing there, staring. Finally, I got up and walked to the window, thinking maybe if she saw me looking back, she'd realize she was making me uncomfortable and leave. But when I got close to the glass, she smiled. It wasn't a friendly smile. It was knowing, secretive, like she could see something about me that I couldn't see myself. I closed the curtains and stepped back from the window, my heart beating a little faster than normal. I told myself I was being paranoid. She was probably just someone from the neighborhood taking a walk, maybe admiring my Christmas lights. Nothing sinister about it. But when I peeked through the curtains again, 5 minutes later, she was still there. Same position, same smile. This time I went to the front door, opened it, and called out, "Can I help you with something?" The woman didn't respond. She just tilted her head slightly to one side, like she was considering my question, then turned and walked away down the sidewalk. Not quickly, not slowly, just a normal walking pace. I watched until she turned the corner and disappeared from sight. I went back inside and locked the door, feeling foolish. Nothing had actually happened. A woman had been standing on a public sidewalk. That wasn't a crime. Maybe she'd been waiting for someone. Or maybe she'd been lost and trying to figure out where she was. There were a dozen innocent explanations. Still, something about the encounter bothered me for the rest of the evening. The next morning, December 23rd, I woke up around 7 and went into the kitchen to make coffee. While waiting for it to brew, I glanced out the kitchen window that faced my backyard. My breath caught in my throat. The woman was there, in my backyard, standing about 20 feet from the house, facing the kitchen window, facing me. She was wearing the same dark coat and hat. And she was smiling that same disturbing smile. I grabbed the phone and dialed 911. My hands were shaking so badly, I could barely press the buttons. "There's someone in my yard," I told the dispatcher. "A woman. She was outside my house yesterday, too. Just standing there staring, and now she's in my backyard. I think she's stalking me." The dispatcher was calm and professional, took down my information, my address, told me a patrol car was on the way. "Is she doing anything threatening?" the dispatcher asked. "Is she trying to get into your house?" "No, she's just standing there, but she's been there for several minutes. She's not moving. She's just staring at me through the window." Even as I said it, I realized how it sounded. Crazy, paranoid. The ramblings of a lonely old woman who watched too many true crime shows. But I knew what I was seeing. This wasn't my imagination. "Officers should be there in about 5 minutes," the dispatcher said. "Stay on the line with me until they arrive, and stay inside the house. Don't go out to confront her." I stayed on the line, watching the woman through the window. She never moved, didn't shift her weight, didn't look around, didn't do anything. Just stood there in the cold morning air, staring at me with that horrible smile. When I heard the police sirens approaching, I felt a wave of relief. Finally, someone would see her, talk to her, make her leave. But when I looked back out the window, she was gone. I searched my entire backyard with my eyes, behind the shed, near the fence line, everywhere. Nothing. She had vanished in the few seconds I'd looked away. The police arrived and searched my property. They found no footprints in the frost-covered grass, no sign that anyone had been there. At this point, would you still believe you were imagining things? One of the officers, a young woman with kind eyes, suggested gently that maybe I'd seen a shadow or a reflection. Maybe the stress of the holidays was getting to me. Was I taking any medications that might cause hallucinations? I wanted to scream. I wasn't hallucinating. I wasn't senile. I knew what I'd seen. But I thanked them for coming and watched them drive away, feeling helpless and foolish. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept getting up every hour to check all the windows, to peer out into the darkness, looking for her, looking for that woman who shouldn't exist, but did. Christmas Eve arrived. I'd barely slept in 2 days. My eyes felt gritty and dry, my head ached, and I kept jumping at every little sound. I thought about calling my daughters, but what would I tell them? That a strange woman had been staring at me and then disappeared? They'd worry. They'd think I was losing my mind. Maybe they'd even insist I move into some kind of assisted living facility. I couldn't bear that. Around 8 o'clock that evening, I was in the living room trying to distract myself with television when the lights went out. The entire house went dark. I sat frozen in my chair, listening to the sudden silence. The hum of the refrigerator stopped. The furnace shut off. The only light came from the street lamp outside, filtering weakly through my curtains. I fumbled for the flashlight I kept in the end table drawer and turned it on. Power outages weren't uncommon in winter, especially during storms, but the weather had been clear all day. I went to the front window and looked out. Every house on the street still had lights on. It was just my house, just me. I went to check the circuit breaker in the basement, but as I approached the basement door, I heard something that made me stop dead in my tracks. Footsteps above me on the roof. Slow, heavy footsteps walking from one end of the house to the other. Back and forth, back and forth. Someone was on my roof. I ran to the phone, but the line was dead. The phone line came in through the basement, and whoever was on my roof must have cut it. I grabbed my car keys and my coat, ready to run out the front door and drive to the nearest police station. But when I looked through the front door's peephole, I saw her, the woman. She was standing on my front porch, inches from the door, staring directly at the peephole, directly at my eye, like she knew I was looking. "Hello, Margaret," she said softly. Her voice was muffled through the door, but I could hear her clearly. "I've been watching you for so long, 3 days now. Watching you through your windows, learning your routines, studying you. Do you know why?" I didn't answer, couldn't answer. My throat had closed up with terror. "Because you're alone," she continued. "No husband, no children nearby. No one to miss you if you disappeared on Christmas Eve. No one to hear you scream, 'You're perfect.'" I backed away from the door, my legs trembling so badly I could barely stand. The footsteps on the roof had stopped. Now I heard them coming down the side of the house. She wasn't alone. There were at least 2 of them, maybe more. I ran to the back door to escape through the yard. But when I got to the kitchen, I saw another face pressed against the back door window. A man this time, middle-aged, with dead eyes and that same knowing smile. I was trapped. I ran upstairs to my bedroom, locked the door, and pushed my dresser in front of it. I could hear them now, downstairs, inside my house. They'd gotten in somehow, through a window maybe, or a door I'd forgotten to lock in my panic. I heard them moving through the rooms below, opening closets, checking behind furniture, searching. "Margaret," the woman's voice called up the stairs. "We're going to find you eventually. Why make this harder than it needs to be? Come down, let's talk. Let's get to know each other before the fun begins." I grabbed the phone by my bedside, but like the one downstairs, it was dead. I was truly alone with no way to call for help. I could hear them climbing the stairs now, their footsteps slow and deliberate. They weren't in a hurry. They knew I had nowhere to go. I looked around desperately for a weapon, for anything I could use to defend myself. I grabbed a heavy bookend from my shelf and stood behind the door, ready to fight. The footsteps stopped outside my bedroom. The doorknob turned slowly, testing the lock. Then came a soft knock. "Margaret, open the door." When I didn't respond, there was a long silence. Then the woman spoke again, and what she said made my blood run cold. "We've done this before, you know. 63 houses over 12 years. Always at Christmas. Always someone alone. No one ever believes them when they try to report us. No footprints, no evidence, no proof. We're very good at this. And by tomorrow morning, when your neighbors notice your car still in the driveway and all your lights off, by the time they call for a welfare check, we'll be long gone, and you'll be ours. I heard them walk away from the door. Their footsteps retreated down the hallway, down the stairs, and then I heard the front door open and close. Silence. Complete silence. I waited, pressing my ear against the bedroom door, listening for any sound that might indicate they were still in the house. Nothing. I stayed in that bedroom for 6 hours, didn't move the dresser, didn't open the door, just sat on my bed with the bookend in my hands, waiting for dawn. When the sun finally came up on Christmas morning, I slowly, carefully moved the dresser and opened the door. The house was empty. I checked every room, every closet, every possible hiding place. They were gone, but they'd left something behind. On my kitchen table was a Polaroid photograph. It showed me sitting in my armchair the night before, reading my book, completely unaware that someone was taking my picture through my living room window. On the back of the photo, written in neat handwriting, was a message. "Merry Christmas, Margaret. We'll see you next year." I sold that house within a month. Took a loss on it because I was in such a hurry to leave. I moved to an apartment building in downtown Portsmouth, somewhere with neighbors on all sides, with security cameras in the hallways, with locks on every entrance. Somewhere I would never be truly alone. I never spent another Christmas by myself. Even if my daughters couldn't come to me, I went to them. I would rather fly across the country than risk being alone on Christmas Eve ever again. That was 27 years ago. I'm 82 now, and I still have that photograph. I keep it in a safe deposit box at the bank. I've never shown it to anyone, never reported it to police. What would be the point? They disappeared like ghosts, left no trace except that single photo. But I know they're still out there. Every Christmas, I wonder if they're watching someone else, studying them through their windows, waiting for their chance. And I wonder how many others there have been. How many lonely people have disappeared on Christmas Eve, their cases never solved, their fates never known? How many Polaroid photographs exist in safe deposit boxes and hidden drawers, kept secret by people too frightened or too ashamed to admit what happened to them? So if you're alone this Christmas, if you find yourself sitting in your house after dark with the curtains open and the lights on, please, I'm begging you, close those curtains. Lock your doors. Check them twice. Don't assume that because you live in a safe neighborhood, because nothing bad has ever happened to you before, that you're protected. Evil doesn't discriminate. It doesn't care if you're young or old, rich or poor. It only cares that you're alone, vulnerable, and that no one will hear you when you call for help. These 3 Christmases, the photograph, the snow child, and the window, they taught me something important. They taught me that the holidays aren't always merry and bright. Sometimes they're dark and terrifying. Sometimes the monsters aren't hiding under your bed or in your closet. Sometimes they're standing on your sidewalk, staring at you through your window, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. I've carried these stories with me for decades, never telling anyone the full truth until now. Maybe you believe me, maybe you don't. But I hope you'll remember them when Christmas comes around. I hope you'll think twice before leaving your curtains open after dark. I hope you'll check your locks and look over your shoulder and trust that uneasy feeling in your gut when something doesn't feel right. Because I'm living proof that you can survive the worst Christmas has to offer. But survival comes at a price. It comes with nightmares that never quite fade, with paranoia that never fully leaves, with the knowledge that there are things in this world that can't be explained or understood or fought with rational thinking. Stay safe this Christmas. Keep your loved ones close. And whatever you do, don't ignore the warning signs. Because by the time you realize something is wrong, it might already be too late. Merry Christmas, dear, and God help us all.